These are the Gateron Caps. They are a full nylon housing switch with a palm stem. They have an actuation force of 50 grams, have a pre-travel of 2 millimeters, and a total travel of 4 millimeters. There are two variants of this switch. The Milky has a non-gold plated spring, and the Yellow has a gold plated spring. Now, what is the difference about these switches is the way they are made. The stems of the Gateron Caps are now enlarged and have an opening that is filled by the bottom housing, which now has a pole. Basically, the stem and the bottom housing poles have been reversed. This design has been made to, in theory, I don't know how confident they are with this statement, be more stable, reduce wobble, and reduce actuation resistance. They are also stated to increase self-lubrication performance, but that is stated with literally every palm stem. These switches come factory lubed and are sold at around $12 for 35 switches. The switches were in a pre-order phase around November 2020 on KBD fans and have been on pre-order on other proxies as well. Currently, they are being sold as in-stock items on many sites that I know of, such as KBD fans, Novel Keys, so on. The switches came around the end of November, so they arrived in the same month, which is great. Upon typing on these switches, I had mixed feelings. On one hand, I enjoyed the feel of these switches being really smooth factory lube switches, but along with this smoothness, there was also a little bit of scratchiness to the switches. Confusing, right? How can a switch be both smooth and scratchy at the same time? Beats me, man. I just make switch reviews. Now keep in mind, these are the gold Gateron Caps. I haven't talked about the Milky Gateron Caps yet. Now, even though I don't vibe with the whole weird fuzzy scratchiness to these switches, I do appreciate the smoothness of them. And don't even get me started to the sound. No, actually, don't at all. It shouldn't be a factor, being that there are so many variables to sound. But just for the sake of it, and the GK61 that I was lubing, these were hella nice. On to the Milky variants. These I made the late decision of purchasing, being that I didn't really think there was a difference between gold and Milky, but I realized that one has a gold plated spring, being the gold Gat Caps, and the Milky ones don't. But surprisingly, there are other differences in the switches that I really didn't expect. Now, as you could tell, there seems to be no difference at all. And I would say I agree, but the feel of these switches are different. On one hand, we have the gold Gateron Caps, and there's some enigma with a scratchy and smooth feel. On another hand, we have the Milky Gateron Caps that are smooth and have no scratchiness at all. Why is this? Why in the hell is that two switches, the gold one, which the only difference being that it has a gold plated spring, which lessens spring ping, which doesn't have anything at all to do with like scratchiness of the switch, be scratchier than the Milky that is the same switch as the gold variant, but with a plain non-gold plated spring. And then I realized it might have nothing to do with the switch ping or housing at all. Now I want to talk about something with these switches that some of you may know about if you have purchased these switches for yourself. I mean, the switches have been out for nearly 4 months now. These switches, as I have mentioned before, are factory lube. Now this is just a straight up theory, at least for me, but what I believe is going on here is that the lube that the factory has applied is affecting the way these switches feel. No fucking shit. Recently on a stream, I was talking about Gateron Cap switches, twitch.tv/MiloDown. I got into a conversation with a user who was talking about the Gateron Cap switches as well. So we were talking, and they talked about how their switches were an abysmal when it came to their switches factory lube. And I asked, oh, you know, it can't be that bad. I mean, like, my switches were over lube for sure, but like, how bad could it be? They had put their Gateron Cap switches in an ultrasonic bath for about 5 cycles. 5 fucking cycles. Now you might be wondering, what an ultrasonic bath is. This is when we use an ultrasonic cleaner that uses ultrasound to remove the fluid. In this case, the lube off of the Gateron caps. Usually it takes 1 cycle to get the lube off the switches, maybe even 2, but 5? You have to put like a bucket of fucking lube onto a single switch to get you to do 5 ultrasonic cycles. Like, Jesus Christ. This brings me to an issue with these switches. The lube, as a Keep enthusiast, I can't believe I just fucking said that. As a Keep enthusiast, you would mostly prefer a switch that was unlubed, just so that you can have the assurance that these switches will not come with any inconsistencies and feel with the lube job. What Gateron did with these switches is kind of silly, being that they lube these switches to the point where they are just seeping lube out of the housing and onto the board, and it's just grody. Now, do I care about this? Not really. But as a keyboard enthusiast, I understand that this shit does not fly and really should not be what Gateron ships out to their vendors and proxies and even their customers. If Gateron had just sent these switches unlubed, then hey, this review would have been all positives, like, hell yeah, good on Gateron for creating an interesting design switch that improves on many lingering issues with the current designs of switch housings and stems. But for me, it really gets buried by the fact that they did such a terrible job with lube consistency on these switches. Sorry, that was an absolutely unnecessary rant, but I'm sure there are some people who feel the same way. Don't get me wrong, these switches are still fucking amazing, deliciously smooth, and I still consider them one of my top favorite linear switches. Basically tied with the Yellows. Okay, maybe not basically tied with the Yellows, maybe like second or third. Now, how about the lubed experience of these switches? Well, me, being the wacko that I am having no knowledge of ultrasonic cleaning when I received these switches. Also, the fact that I didn't realize how crazy lubed these were, I lubed over the factory lube of the golden Gateron caps and tested them out. I lubed them with Krytox 205 grade 0, spring lubed with 105 grade 0, and filmed with TX Films 0.125mm. Now, as you can tell with some of the switches, they sound very sticky and muted as well. The feel of these switches also feel sticky and sluggish. This being that I was a fool in lubing these even more than they should have been lubed. Now, the reason why I'm not going to be redoing these switches lube-wise and showing you the sound test of them is because I'm basically providing you with the example of what someone with no knowledge of cleaning factory lube switches would do. Now, you might be thinking, there's nobody out there that is that stupid to not clean the factory lube off of switches. Bitch, what are you fucking talking about? You're looking at one right now. In a lot of cases, when the manufacturers state they're factory lube, they indicate whether or not they can be lubed over, being that they were light lube applications. But in the case of the Gateron caps, they did not state this. They didn't state anything about lube at all. Now, me, as an absolute degenerate that I am, I assumed they were just stock switches with no lube at all. So, I lubed them. It wasn't until I finished lubing these switches and cleaning up that I realized these switches were factory lube. Whose fault is it? Mine or the manufacturer? You decide. It's probably me. Now, me, being the absolute amazing person that I am and a man of the community, with a milky Gateron caps, I decided to clean off the factory lube and apply a completely new coat of Krytox 205 grade 0 and spring lube of 105 grade 0 and switch film with 0.125 TX films just for you guys. I'm so awesome, aren't I? Like, the feel of these milky Gateron caps cleaned and lubed are amazing. They don't feel sluggish. They actually feel really snappy when typing on them. Like, these cleaned and relubed are 100 times better than the gold caps that I just lubed over. Maybe I'll try the gold Gat caps cleaned and relubed, I don't know. But these switches, they are really great. But if you think about it, was it really worth it? Like, when I did the cleaning process of these switches, I didn't have an ultrasonic cleaner. And for the people who do have one or have tried cleaning switches by hand, they know the pain that it is. Switch it back. Put it back. Inverted spacebar is inferior. So would I say it was worth doing all that work for these amazing feeling switches? Yeah. I'm a fucking degen. You really think spending hours just for a switch to feel amazing is going to deter me from saying it was worth it? Fuck no. But for others, obviously it's not worth it. And I don't know how committed to the keyboard hobby you are, but investing in an ultrasonic cleaner may not be a decision you want to make. Purchasing an ultrasonic cleaner means you have to spend more money to create another step in the process for improving a switch's feel, and I don't feel a lot of people are willing to make that step if they're just entering the hobby. But if you are in the hobby to stay and you buy some Gat caps, buy an ultrasonic cleaner. It saves so much time. Trust me. Now it's time to move on to the next topic. How do these compare to other linear switches? But hey now, this time we aren't comparing them to the top linear boys like the Oways and the Alpacas. No. We're comparing them to the other Gateron Yellow lineups. I'm talking Gateron Full Milky Yellows, Gateron Milky Top Black Bottom Yellows, Gateron Ink Yellows, Gateron Plain Yellows, the whole shebang. Let's first compare the stock / factory lube version of these switches. Since we are comparing the switches to the Gateron Caps, I will only be talking about the switches that are being compared to them. First, the full Milky Housing Gat Yellows. They come unlubed, 50 gram actuation, 4mm travel, similar to the Gat Caps. They're basically the switch that is being matched with the Milky Gat Caps. How do they feel? Well, they are scratchy obviously, but they do feel slightly lighter than the Gat Caps, being the fact that they don't have any lube that is interfering with how fast the switch travels. Next is the Milky Top Black Bottom Gat Yellows. Same shtick, 50 gram actuation, 4mm travel, just black bottom, Milky Top. These also come unlubed, so you got that scratchy sound and feel to the switch, similar to the full Milky Housing Gateron Yellows. These feel lighter due to the fact that they don't have any lube, but I could say the sound of these switches are less stocky compared to the full Milky Housing Gat Yellows. Next is the plain Gateron Yellows. Unlike all the other switches here today, the plain Gateron Yellows are a plate mount switch, which means they don't have 5 pin to have that extra security in the PCB, but instead have 3 pins. The Gateron Yellows, well, they feel and sound like stock switches, but they aren't as bad as I thought they would be. They aren't great, but still good enough where I wouldn't complain about these switches being stock in a board. Sound wise, you'll hear spring ping, they're stock. Finally are the Gat Ink Yellows V2. Now these are a little different to the other Gat Yellows. These have 3.5mm travel and actuation force of 60 gram and a bottom out force of 67 grams. Have a full yellow transparent housing and have a different stem design, this being a box switch looking variant. But it's not even box shaped. They just stuck brackets on there. I don't know why the fuck it's like that, to be honest. Yo, why the fuck did they add that onto the switch? No, it's not like the box shades. What the fuck? Why the fuck did they do that? The feel of these switches, even though they are stock switches, they do not feel scratchy at all compared to the likes of the full Milky Gats, Milky Top Black Bottom Gats, and Gat Yellows. But they have really loud ping coming from the switches. The sound, if you ignore the pinging, is probably the thockiest of all the Gat Yellow switches, excluding the Gat Caps. They feel great too. Wow. These are really good for stock, excluding the spring. They sound stocky just because of the GK61, but yeah, these are these feel great, stock. Now I know it's unfair to place these on a ranking against the Gat Caps since they are pre-lubed, but for the sake of it, I'll place the Milky Gat Caps at number 1, Gold Caps number 2, Gat Ink Yellows number 3, Full Milky Gat Yellows number 4, Milky Top Black Bottom Gat Yellows at number 5. Now how do they compare to one another on a leveled playing field where they are all lubed and filmed? Now for this test, all switches will be treated similarly. They will be lubed with Crytox 205 grade 0, spring lube with Crytox 105 grade 0, and switch filmed with 0.125 TX films. First, the full Milkies. These switches feel great with lubing and filming. Compared to the switches stock, these switches lubed sound more full and have a more rounded out sound profile. The feel of these switches are very smooth. I do really appreciate how much of an improvement there is between both the stock and lube versions of this switch. Next, the Milky Top Black Bottom. These also feel great with lubing and filming done to them. The spring ping is now gone. The sound of these switches don't sound as hollow as when they were stock, and they feel so smooth. To be real with you guys, this is my first time trying Gateron Yellows for all these switches, and man, I could see why people love these switches so much. Next, the plain Gateron Yellows. These switches, oh my fucking god. These switches, these fucking switches are fucking amazing. Never have I ever thought these switches could be so much smoother and so much nicer than any other switch that costs more. This is actually amazing. I saw people were calling the Milky Top Black Bottom the Budget King, but I guess I was mistaken with the two switches, but holy, these are fucking amazing. Finally, the Gat Ink Yellows. These are one of the best ones feel-wise in my opinion. The feel of these switches are so smooth. The sound of these switches are not hollow at all, no spring ping, and they got shine through. Not really a big key feature to sell a switch to me, but it's appreciated. Obviously, they are the more pricier switches of the bunch, so I can't really say these are the best for the price. So how would I rank these compared to the Gateron Caps? Both the Milky and the Gold variants. In first, I would have to put the Gateron Caps Milky variant. These switches were fully cleaned and then lubed and filmed, so this might mean that for the best feeling switches, according to Smile Down's opinion, are fully cleaned Gateron Caps. Second is the plain Gateron Yellows. I'm honestly shocked at how good these switches are lubed and filmed. Like, yeah, every once in a while the switches don't close properly because the top housing legs bent out a bit too far when opening them, but these are really smooth switches. Holy, good on them. Third is the Gateron Ink Yellows. I just can't get over the feel of those switches alongside the sound of them. I know there's a whole island full of variables that affect sound, but for these switches, they get their third place. Fourth is the Gateron Caps Gold variant. Now these are the ones that were factory lubed and lubed over as well. So you would wonder, why would this man put these in fourth? The fuck? Well, I still do like them. They feel really smooth. When typing, the graining feel that I talked about earlier isn't as noticeable when you're just full on typing on these switches. And the sound profile of these switches are perfectly fine as well. Fifth is the Milky Top and Black Bottom Gateron Yellows. I said earlier in the video that the stock version of these switches feel less stockier than the full Milky housing Gat Yellows, but as a lube switch, I would have to say that they sound more stockier than the full Milky Gat Yellows. And in sixth is the full Milky housing Gat Yellows. As much as I like them as a stock switch, the lube switches were just destroyed by its competitors. Now I'm not saying these are bad switches. No, these are great switches, both as a switch and for its value. Even though they came in fifth, does not mean you shouldn't get these switches. Now these rankings are purely subjective and all of that, and a lot of it's purely preference. But you know what isn't preference? Money. Well, it kind of is, but that's just a whole thing as well. Where do you prefer price over? Anyways, let's rank these switches based on value for worth or feel or whatever the fuck. Ranked first is the fucking plain Gateron Yellows. I purchased these switches for about $24 for 90 switches, which makes them around like 26 cents per switch. These switches were the underdogs for me in this whole video in general. I know there are videos of people calling these switches the Budget King and all that, but as I said in a previous video, I do not take any videos already made by other reviewers into consideration and form a bias for my reviews. And after trying these switches, I can confirm that these are really amazing switches for their value and can be crowned the Budget Kings. Ranked second are the Gateron Milky Caps. I purchased these switches for around $50 for 105 switches, which is around 48 cents per switch. They are more pricier than the plain Gateron Yellows, but with how good these switches feel, I feel they are really good for their price as well. Ranked third are the Gateron Milky Top and Black Bottom switches. I bought these switches for about $28 for 100 switches, which is around 28 cents per switch. I thought about putting these switches in second for a fair bit of time, but I have to admit that the Gateron Milky Caps are just really good and are definitely worth the value that they are. But these switches are really good for their value as well. Hell, these are really good for the cost of these switches. If I were able to, I would place these switches in second along with the Milky Gat Caps. Fourth place are the Gateron Ink Yellows. I bought these switches for around $64 for 80 switches, which is 80 cents per switch. These are the most expensive switches compared to all the other switches here, but these switches are really great. Like for 80 cents for these switches, I can't disagree with it. But there are the likes of the Gateron Yellows that give you almost a similar feel as well. They're so much cheaper. Fifth place are the Gateron Gold Caps. I purchased these for $60 for 105 switches, which is around 57 cents per switch. I love these switches as well, but the Milky Gat Caps are the nicer switch between the two and are also cheaper than the Gold Caps by around $10. Plus, there are the plain Gat Yellows. And in sixth are the full Milky Gateron Yellows. Once again, these aren't bad switches, but compared to the other switches, they were just dominated in both feel and value. I bought these switches for $28 for 105 switches, similar to the Gateron Milky Top and Black Bottoms. They're also on the cheaper side, but with the likes of both the plain Gateron Yellows and the Milky Top Black Bottom Gat Yellows, these were just destroyed in ranks. While on comparison of these switches, let's compare the stem and housing wobble of these switches as well. First, the stock version of these switches. All of these switches have stem wobble, and there really isn't much you can do to fix this. The housing wobble of these switches, on the other hand, all are different from one another. The Milky Top, Black Bottom, and full Milky housing switches both have a fair bit of wobble, while the Gat Cap Gold, Gat Cap Milky, Gat Ink Yellow, and plain Gat Yellows have so much wobble that when testing the stems, the housing wobbled as well. Next, the filmed version of these switches. Stem wobble is all the same, so again, nothing you could do about that. Housing wobble for the Milk Top, Black Bottom, and the full Milky housing switches had little to no housing wobble. If you want no wobble at all, going up to a 0.15mm film wouldn't hurt. The housing wobble for the Gat Cap Gold, Gat Cap Milky, Gat Ink Yellow, and plain Gat Yellows still had a fair bit of wobble. So going up to 0.15mm or Desky films, which are about 3.3mm, is recommended. I'm not sure whether or not they would fit, being that I have not tested it myself. So if you want to try it out, you can go ahead and try that. So would I recommend these Gateron Caps? Maybe. These Gat Caps are really great switches. They feel amazing, both factory lubed and clean lubed, but the process for these switches to feel great takes such a long time, being that they require you to clean them by hand, which is absolutely painful, where you take apart the switch entirely, remove the leaves, and clean the housing and stem with IPA, which is isopropyl alcohol, that isn't above 70%. Put the leaves back into the bottom housing, lube the housing and stem, then put the switch together, or use an ultrasonic cleaner to clean the switch, which is just the things you do by hand to clean the switch, but without taking everything apart entirely then lubing. Also, the switches come pre-lubed ridiculously to the point they are literally sweating lube out of the switches and onto the plate of your keyboard. Another point is that there are other switches like the plain Gat Yellows that are so good and so smooth, while also having such an amazing price of 26 cents per switch. But if none of these things matter and you just want a new switch to try out that are smooth and great feeling out of the box, then sure, go for these switches. But I would have to say the Milky variants are better than the Gold variants in my opinion. So in conclusion, the Gateron Cap switches are a smooth, linear switch with a great spin on the way switches are designed and made. But they really gotta get their shit together on the amount of lube they're putting into their switches, man. What the f. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like on the video. And if you want similar content like this, check out my other videos. I do other reviews as well. If you like that content, why don't you hit that subscribe button, eh? I also stream on Twitch. We do a lot of keyboard stuff over there. Here's a clip of the things that I do over there. Why is it hard? Why is it hard? So once again, thank you guys for watching. This video was a really long process. It took me about 4 months to finish. So thank you guys for sticking with me. Hope you guys enjoyed the content. It's gonna keep coming. And yeah, thanks again. I'll see you all next time. Peace.